My stepmother stood in front of 200 people and told them I'd been dishonorably discharged from the U.S. Army. She said it calmly, like it was the truth, like she'd been carrying that story for years. What she didn't know was that the man whose life I kept alive for 9 hours in a collapsed field hospital was standing just 10 feet behind her, and he had the truth in his pocket. That moment, that exact moment, is the one I'll carry for the rest of my life. Not because it was the worst thing Deborah Carter ever did to me, but because it was the last. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you who I am before someone else tells it wrong. My name is Madison Carter. I'm 41 years old. I spent 16 years in the United States Army as a 68W combat medic. 3 deployments, 2 war zones, Iraq, Afghanistan, Mosul. I have a silver star sitting in a drawer in my apartment. I don't display it. Never did. What I carry instead are 2 crooked fingers on my left hand that never healed right. They ache when the temperature drops below 50 degrees. That's how I know winter's coming before the forecast does. I enlisted in 2002. I was 19, not because I had some grand plan, but because it was the first place I'd ever been where what you did mattered more than what people said about you. Out there, your hands told the truth. Not your story, not your past, your hands. And mine, they kept people breathing, sometimes long enough to make it home, sometimes just long enough to say goodbye. And before any of that, before the uniform, before the deployments, there was a house that used to feel like home. My mother, my real mother, Catherine, died when I was 9, ovarian cancer. 10 years later, I could still remember the way she laughed in the kitchen. But the house didn't sound like that anymore. By the time I was 12, Deborah Whitfield had become Deborah Carter, and slowly, everything changed. Not all at once. That wasn't her way. She didn't tear things down. She edited them. A comment here, a correction there. A story adjusted just enough until the original version didn't exist anymore. In her version, my mother became a memory that faded, and I became something unfinished. The first draft, she made it clear without ever saying it outright. There was only room for one real family in that house, and it wasn't the one I came from. So when I left at 19, it didn't feel like I was walking away from home. It felt like I was stepping out of a place that had already decided I didn't belong. And the Army was the first place that didn't ask me where I came from. It just asked what I could carry. Basic training at Fort Sam Houston, then AIT, then my first duty station, and just like that, the world changed. Not bigger, sharper. Everything had edges. Everything mattered. As a 68W, you learn fast. The snap of latex gloves in a trauma tent doesn't mean practice, it means someone is bleeding. It means your hands are the only thing standing between that person and a flag-draped casket. You learn to move before you think, and think while you move. I deployed to Iraq in 2005. Came back a sergeant. Afghanistan in 2010. Came back a staff sergeant. Mosul, 2016. That one stayed with me. A mortar strike took down part of our field hospital. Concrete, dust, screaming, then silence in between. I taped my own left hand together, 2 fingers broken, bent wrong, and kept working. 3 soldiers, 9 hours. One of them was a lieutenant colonel with a severed femoral artery. One of them didn't make it. Corporal Jason Walker, 21 years old. He died about 20 minutes before the birds got to us. I held his hand and told him he was going to be fine. I lead. That's not in the citation. What is that I came home with a silver star. But the truth is, the Army didn't give me a medal. It gave me something harder to explain. A place where what you did mattered more than what anyone said about you. Where your hands told the truth, even when you didn't. And once you've lived in a world like that, you don't forget the difference. And back home, there was another version of me being written. Not by me. By Deborah. She didn't start with lies you could catch. She started small. A comment here, a concern there, just enough to make people tilt their heads and wonder. After my first deployment, she told my father's friends I barely made it through basic. That I couldn't handle pressure. That the Army was being patient with me. I didn't know. I was at Fort Hood, running trauma drills, requalifying on my weapon. Still believing the people back home were proud of me. After my second deployment, it changed. Not louder, sharper. Now I had anger issues. Now there were reports. Now officers were concerned. She used words that sounded like care, until you listened closely enough to hear the pattern. And then Mosul. While I was on a concrete floor, taping my own broken fingers together so I could keep pressure on a man's artery, she told people I had been discharged. Dishonorably, she said it gently. Like it hurt her to say it, like she had tried everything. That was her gift. She didn't just tell a lie. She built a version of me that people could believe. And the hardest part wasn't what she said. It was what my father didn't. He heard all of it. Every version, Deborah told. And he stayed quiet. Not because he believed her not completely, but because her voice filled the room, and mine was 7,000 miles away. My father, Robert Carter, was the kind of man who survived by not making waves, even if the water wasn't his anymore. I came home in 2019. Honorable discharge. 16 years. I took a job as a trauma nurse in Northern Virginia. Same work. Different uniform. I thought, maybe now things would be different. I called. No answer. I wrote letters. No reply. I drove to the house on Maple Crest Drive, the one my mother chose, the one my father paid off. The one Deborah redesigned into something I didn't recognize. Deborah answered the door. She looked at me the way you look at someone you're about to turn away politely. He's sleeping, she said. He doesn't want visitors. It was 4:00 inches the afternoon. I stood there holding a box of Arturo Fuente Hemingways. My father's favorite. The short ones. He used to say they didn't make him feel guilty about finishing them. I could see the living room lights on through the window. I could hear the TV. Can you give him these? I asked. She took the box. Didn't look at it. I'll let him know you stopped by. And then the door closed. I stood on that porch for a second longer than I needed to. Cold air, gray sky, the kind of afternoon that doesn't fully become anything. Then I left. 3 weeks later, Harold Thompson called me. Retired Army Major. My father's oldest friend, the only man Deborah never quite managed to control. His voice was careful. Madison, your father was awake that day. He asked where you were. Deborah told him you canceled. I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot when he said it. Engine off. Hands on the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling something shift into place that I couldn't move back. It wasn't anger. It was absence. The kind you can't argue with. Tyler, my half-brother, he tried. In his own way. He wasn't cruel. He just grew up inside her version of things. The way a fish grows up in water, never questioning what it's breathing. When I asked about Thanksgiving, he said it might be too stressful for Dad if I came. Too stressful. I had spent 16 years in war zones, and I was too much for my own family's dining room. By the time my father turned 69, I was already gone from that house. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. And then, 11 months later, he was gone. Heart attack, 69. I didn't hear it from family. I heard it from Harold. At the funeral, Deborah told people I'd had a difficult time, like I was the story that needed explaining. Then, she filed the paperwork. $112,000. Life insurance. A forged signature. $400 in cash. Even after he was gone, she was still rewriting me. And the memorial. That's where it all came to a head. Late October, Briarwood Country Club. About 200 people. Champagne on silver trays. Prime rib. Glazed salmon. A 3-tier cake with my father's face printed on it. It looked impressive. It just didn't look like him. My father would have wanted pulled pork, paper plates, a cooler of beer, and someone telling the same fishing story for the 10th time. Not this. Not a ballroom full of people who knew his name, but not his life. I walked in at 4:15 p.m. Cold air followed me through the doors. The sky outside was that flat gray you get before rain decides what it's doing. I kept it simple: dark slacks, navy cardigan, flat shoes, nothing that asked for attention. Deborah was at the entrance. Charcoal dress. Pearls. A smile that looked practiced. Oh, Madison. A pause, just long enough to register surprise. I didn't think you'd come. No hug. No welcome. She turned before I could answer. That told me everything. No seat with my name. No place card. I picked up the program from a table near the coat check. Read it standing there while people moved around me like I wasn't part of the room. Tyler's career. Deborah's charity work. My father's years at the Postal Service. Small but strong. That's what it said. I wasn't in it. Not one line. I walked over to the memorial table. 15 photos in matching silver frames. My father at retirement, with Deborah at galas, with Tyler at a baseball game, with friends on a dock in the Outer Banks. I stood there longer than I meant to, because I knew those pictures. I was in some of the originals, 3 of them. Not anymore. Cropped, reprinted, adjusted, like I had never been there at all. I found a chair near the emergency exit, the kind of spot people don't notice unless they're looking for a way out. A server placed a plate in front of me. Salmon, asparagus. I didn't touch it. I folded my napkin and set it beside the plate. And I sat there, in a room built to remember my father, watching a version of his life, where I no longer existed. And then Deborah stepped up to the podium. 5 o'clock. The room quieted like it had been waiting for her. She smiled. Steady. Practiced. Robert Carter was the heart of this family. She talked about Tyler, about her charity work, about the life they built, from the ground up, like nothing existed before her. She said small but strong. She never said my name. The applause came easy. Then she raised her hand again. And the room went still. I need to address something difficult. That tone, the one that sounds like honesty, until you realize it's been rehearsed. Some of you may have noticed Robert's older daughter is here tonight. 200 people turned, found me. Madison was dishonorably discharged from the United States Army for insubordination. She let it sit there. She's been lying to this family for years. Then she looked right at me. I'm asking you to leave. No one moved. No one spoke. Just silence. And then she added the one thing she'd been saving. Your father knew. He was ashamed. And for a second, the room waited for me to break. I didn't. I didn't move. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't give her anything to work with. 200 people were looking at me, waiting for a reaction, a denial, something. I gave them nothing. My hands stayed at my sides. My left pocket pressed against my leg. The weight of that wallet still there. The photograph. The note. I held my ground. Because the truth doesn't need volume. It just needs time. People think silence means you've got nothing to say, that you're losing. It doesn't. Sometimes silence is the last thing you give, before the truth walks into the room on its own. And I knew it was already here. And then someone moved. A chair scraped across the floor. Sharp, clean, like it didn't belong in a room that quiet. I didn't see him at first. I heard him. Then I turned. 10 feet behind Deborah, a man in a gray sport coat set his glass down and started walking. Steady, measured. There was a slight hitch in his step, subtle, unless you knew what you were looking at. I did. The crowd parted without being told. No one announced him. No one needed to. People just moved. He didn't go to the podium. He came to me, stopped about 2 feet in front of me, close enough that it was just the 2 of us again. Not 200 people. Not a ballroom. Just us. His eyes went to my left hand. The fingers that never set right. He looked at them the way you look at something you recognize, because you were there when it happened. Then he looked up. November 6. 2 words. Quiet. And just like that, I was back on a concrete floor in Mosul. Dust in the air. Blood on my hands. Tape around my fingers. Colonel Brooks? I said. He gave the smallest nod. You kept your leg, I added. A pause. I kept my life, he said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Edges worn, creases permanent. He'd been carrying it a long time. May I? I nodded. Once. He turned and walked to the podium. Deborah stepped back. Not because she chose to. Because something in her knew. She was no longer in control of the room. He unfolded the paper carefully. Smoothed it flat. My name is Colonel Daniel Brooks, United States Army. The room stilled again. But this time it was different. I did not come here to speak. But I've just listened to a woman be accused of disgracing the uniform. And I cannot remain silent. He lifted the paper slightly. I'm holding a photocopy of a Silver Star citation. You could feel it then. Something shifting. The President of the United States has awarded the Silver Star to Staff Sergeant Madison E. Carter. My name. Out loud. In a room where it hadn't been said once. For gallantry in action. Mosul, Iraq, 2017. No one moved. During a mortar strike that collapsed a field hospital, Staff Sergeant Carter provided continuous trauma care to 3 critically wounded soldiers for approximately 9 hours. 9 hours. Despite fractures to her left hand, she maintained hemorrhage control and preserved the lives of 2 soldiers. He stopped, looked up. That lieutenant colonel was me. Silence. Not the kind you hear, the kind you feel. He folded the paper, set it down, and then he raised his right hand. Crisp, precise, held. A salute. Not to Deborah, not to the room, to me. From the back, Harold stood. Then another man. 3 salutes. 200 witnesses. And just like that, everything she built for 25 years started to come apart in under 30 seconds. And just when the room thought it had seen everything, it wasn't over. Near the terrace doors, Harold Thompson stepped forward, phone still in his hand. The kind of walk that tells you something's already been decided. He stopped beside Deborah, didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. I just spoke with the insurance company's fraud department, he said. They traced the notarization. A pause. Susan Miller, $400, cash. Another pause. They're filing charges. You could feel it hit. Not like a shout, like something heavy dropping straight through the floor. Deborah turned, first to him, then to the room, then to me. I didn't. Her voice cracked. I thought, Robert said, she couldn't finish it. Because no one was listening anymore. Not the colleagues staring down at their plates. Not the friends already creating distance. Not even her own reflection in that moment. And then the glass slipped. Champagne spilling over her fingers before it hit the floor and shattered. Sharp. Bright. Final. And that's when it changed. Not just the story. The room. And that's when I finally moved. Not fast. Not slow. The way you walk into a trauma bay when you already know what you're going to find. Deborah was still standing there. Same spot. Same posture. Only now, there was nothing holding it up. I stopped about 6 feet from her. Close enough to be heard. Far enough that she couldn't reach me. For 2 years, I hadn't said a full sentence to her. Now I did. He didn't tell you that, I said. You told him. It landed. Not loud, but it didn't need to be. Her chin lifted reflex. 25 years of performance doesn't disappear just because the audience changes. You could have told us, she said. Why didn't you ever say anything? I didn't let her finish building another version. You weren't asking questions, Deborah. You were building a story. And you didn't want the truth. You wanted a confession. Her mouth opened. I kept going, because I'd been silent for 25 years, and I wasn't wasting the words now. You built a family that only worked if I didn't exist. You told my father I washed out. You told Tyler I was discharged. You stood in front of 200 people tonight and called me a disgrace. I took a breath, and every word of it. You made up, because the truth made you feel small. She reached for the edge of the podium, held onto it like it might steady something that was already gone. I didn't know, she said. I shook my head. You didn't want to know. There's a difference big enough to lose a family inside it. And you did. I could feel the weight in my left pocket. The photograph. The note. I held a 21-year-old kid's hand while he bled out in a building that was collapsing on top of us, I said. He told me to tell his mom he tried. A pause. That's what I did in the army, Deborah. That's what you called a disgrace. She didn't have anything left after that. No words. No version. Just silence. For once. Not mine. And after that, it didn't explode. It unraveled. Slow. Quiet. Certain. Within a week, the investigation was already moving. Fairfax County doesn't care who you know, or what room you used to walk into like you owned it. They traced the paperwork. The signature. The notarization. $400. Cash. The woman she paid talked within 48 hours. Receipts. Messages. A statement. Truth has a way of showing up when there's nothing left holding it back. By late November, the charges were filed. Insurance fraud. Up to 10 years. The same people who stood in that ballroom started stepping away. Her brokerage put her on leave. Listings reassigned. Clients moved on. The country club board accepted her resignation. A letter she never wrote. Charity boards went quiet. Holiday cards stopped coming. 25 years of carefully built reputation. Gone. Not with noise. Not with drama. Just distance. The kind people create when they realize the story they believed was never true. And for the first time, Deborah didn't have a version left to hold it together. And when everything settled, what was left wasn't noise. It was quiet. The kind that makes people finally hear themselves. My Aunt Margaret called first. Wednesday evening. I was driving home from a 12-hour shift. She said she was sorry, said she believed Deborah, because it was easier than asking questions. She had a box of my father's things. Photos. The real ones. The ones I was still in. I told her I'd take them. 3 weeks later, Tyler called. 4 minutes. That's all it took. I believed her, he said. I'm sorry. I could hear it in his voice. Not just regret, but the weight of it. You were 12 when it started, I told him. You didn't have a choice. A pause. Can I see you sometime? Not Thanksgiving. Not a holiday. Just sometime. Sometime, I said, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a door closing. Just one. Finally opening. And after that, I went home. Not to a house on Maple Crest. Just home. Back porch. Northern Virginia. Late October air cold enough to settle in your bones. Everything was quiet. No voices. No versions of me being passed around a room. Just me. I reached into my left pocket and pulled out my wallet. Same one I'd carried for years. Worn at the fold. Nothing special. Inside, behind my license, was him. Corporal Jason Walker. 21. Dress greens. Standing straight like the world had just started making sense. I turned the photo over. Blue ink. His mother's handwriting. He told me you held his hand. I'll carry that forever. I sat there for a long time. Porch light humming above me. Cold air settling in. He looked like every young soldier I'd ever treated. Certain. Unfinished. Gone too soon. I didn't cry. I just breathed. Because for the first time in a long time, there was nothing left to prove. 6 weeks later, I sat in a VA waiting room. Fluorescent lights. Plastic chairs. A TV nobody was watching. Clipboard in my hands. A form I'd been avoiding for 6 years. I looked down at it, and this time, I didn't hesitate. Branch of Service. United States Army. Moss. 68W. Years served. 16. Rank at separation. Staff Sergeant. No edits. No explanations. No one else's version layered over mine. Just the truth. Written in blue ink. In a room where no one knew my name. And for the first time, that didn't matter. Because I knew it. There's a kind of strength you learn when you stop correcting people. When you let silence carry what it needs to carry. Until the truth arrives on its own. It doesn't come fast. It doesn't come loud. But when it gets there, it doesn't need help. There's freedom in that. A kind of peace you don't get from being right. Only from being done. And after everything, after the lies, the silence, the years of being rewritten, there was nothing left to hold on to, except the one thing no one could take from me. My name. Just Madison. What people say about you can shape perception, but it can't rewrite truth. Real character is revealed over time, through actions, not narratives. Sometimes, the hardest choice is to stay silent when you're being misunderstood, trusting that truth doesn't need to be defended loudly. It only needs time to be seen. This story reminds us that integrity is built in quiet moments, not public approval. And while lies may travel faster, they rarely last. In the end, peace doesn't come from proving others wrong, but from finally standing in your own truth and no longer needing permission to be who you are.